All right, so I'm going to back up just a little bit and repeat that because I do want to record this for students later. It'll be quick. All right, so I'm selecting an area for screen toning, and I'm picking a gray, and I'm just filling that area with gray on a new layer, okay? All right, then I'm going to come up here to Filter, Pixelate, Color Halftone, okay? Now, ignore that it says color because that'll just confuse you. The first most important thing is to make sure that all four of these numbers are exactly the same four numbers. It doesn't matter what number it is as long as they're all the same, okay? Essentially, what this is doing is it's setting up a series of dots. And if those dots are all aligned on top of each other, they'll make pure black and pure white. But if they're off, they're going to start to make colors. And I'll show you an example of that. Then the radius is the actual size of the dot. Okay, so I've got it set on 6 and 45, which is a 45-degree angle. Okay, and I'll hit OK. And you can see here that it's filled this area with dots. Okay, and you can see that how many dots there is, and it's pretty much at exactly a 45-degree angle because that's the angle I chose. Let me undo that and show you what that looks like if you go with a larger number. Let me double that number to 12. Now you got these great big dots, right? That can be a little distracting. That's more like something that you might see in those like serial comics from back in the 50s or something. So I generally want to go with something a little smaller. Okay, I'm gonna go back to like 6 or 5 or something like that. Oops, didn't do it. Let's make that 5. Okay, and the amount of black versus white dots is dependent on what kind of gray you have there. Okay, so if I change that gray to a lighter gray and fill it, it's now lighter gray, and I go back and I hit color halftone, it's still doing the same thing. It's just a smaller amount of black dots compared to the amount of white space. Okay, if I do that in a different order and I instead go with a darker gray and then fill it, you can see there's more black dots than white space. Okay, so it completely depends on what shade of gray you have and what size dots you're using. So it takes a little bit of trial and error. Okay, because it's going to change for each page that you do. Okay, now let me show you one last thing. The thing I said what you don't want to do, and that is changing one of these numbers or forgetting to change one of these numbers. If you do this, you'll know. Okay, so I'm going to change this to like 60. It's on a 360-degree or 180-degree rotation. So I'm going to change that and now hit this. You guys see that monstrosity? That's because all the dots are not laying over the top of each other. Okay, so they're not making black anymore. Right? They have to all be in alignment to make black and pure white. So that's what I said. That's the most important thing that you can do. So I'm going to go back here and make that 45 again. Okay. Now, it gets cooler. So you had some line art, some shading, some hatching already made back here. I can't see it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this to multiply. And boom. There's all my artwork, okay? But I see here that you have sort of hatching coming from top to bottom, meaning it's probably considered to be darker up top and lighter down below. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, and rather than just have solid gray, I'm going to come over here to my gradient tool, and I'm going to make a dark gray. I've got the radial or the linear gradient set, And I'm just going to pull that down a couple times. Get a nice cool gradient going, especially up top. Okay. Now I'm going to go over and apply my halftone. And you'll see there's a tighter concentration of dots on the top than there is on the bottom, right? And now I go back over here and I put it on multiply, okay? And since it's on its own layer, if you need to, erase something out or something like that, you can absolutely do that, okay? So that's the quick, easy way to make screen tones in Photoshop. It takes a little bit of practice, but I want to show you one more quick thing on how you can do this again with gradients. Now, it's important. Are these techniques used in digital comics to give a more physical comic feel? They're used heavily in manga, but they do use them in comics too. It's just another way to add depth. So right here, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to go to my brush tool. I'm going to use that last brush I was using and make sure it's set. Yep. So I have my brush set on pen pressure for both flow and opacity. So if I barely touch it, it's barely going to leave a mark. And then I'm going to put this on screen, which is going to make it get lighter and lighter as we go. I'm going to use that color. And make sure I'm on the right layer here. I'm not. There we go. All right. So I'm going to come through here, and I'm just going to do some values with this airbrush. And you can see that when you're doing chrome, you want to put your lightest lights next to your darkest darks, because that's the way chrome works. Okay, so I'm just going to throw in a little bit of this. I'm not going to go full bore on here. Okay. And then I also want to do these little separation breaks, because there's going to be like a lip right here. Okay, doesn't that look cool? Really helps separate out, that it's chrome and that it's like sections of chrome coming out. So you really have to understand light and shadow and how these things work. But I'm just putting a little bit of highlights on here just to show you something with the screen tones. Okay, so that's probably good for now. I'd probably, take my time and do this a lot more detailed, obviously. Okay. All right, so I've got this grayscale armor that I've used values to create, but my boss says, hey, we need it in black and white only. I told you, black and white only. So you come up here and you hit that color halftone. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger this time because it's a bigger file. The bigger file, the smaller the dots will appear. So I'm going to go to color halftone and bump this up to like 7. And take a look. Okay, so you can see there's a lighter concentration of dots here than there are here where it was much dark gray. Okay, so I will obviously have that recorded. I recorded it from the time I started showing that. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone.
It's what I blew on my pants.
Since I muted, I heard like chaos going on.
It's like cheating.
What's like cheating?
The technique.
What? Why is it like cheating?
Because he said no gradient and then you still have gradient.
Right, but the thing is, these are purely black dots and white dots only. And so if we had to print this as a bitmap or anything like that, there wouldn't be any problems at all.
It has that old, like 80s, 70s, 80s style comic book feel to it.
Yeah, and it can be really effective when you're working on a budget or like,
I always wondered why they did that.
what's that?
I've always wondered why they did that in comics. Now I know.
Yeah, well, the main reason is that back in the day, you couldn't really print gradients very well. You could print gradients of color and stuff pretty nicely now, but back in the day, you couldn't. So in order to get those effects, you need these tones. So, all right. Does anyone else have any questions on how to do that?
Well, I was gonna ask 2 questions.
Sure, go ahead. We got 4 minutes.
The first one is, did you use how dark of a gray did you use? You said it was like mid gray or
On this one or on yours?
on this one?
When I started, this gray was about right there, a little bit darker than that.
Okay.
And then I slowly built up the whites using a screen brush.
Are we supposed to do that on our page 2 ink?
No. You don't have to do this at all. I'm just showing you this technique because some of you guys wanted to like dress up your page, and that is something that I would recommend. Like for instance, if this is your page and you know this is what you got to work with, before you submit it to the final folder, you're probably going to want to come through here and try to clean this up and get rid of all these smudge marks on the side. Oops. So straighten these things out, so on and so forth. You're going to want to do some cleanup before you submit it to the final folder. Okay. So this is another time where you could add those effects. Okay. So like here, for instance, I'll do this. I'm going to do this super fast. I'm going to come through here, and since we have this just stark white on here, it looks like there's light shining on it. So I'm going to fill it with gray. I'm going to hit the halftone, and then I'm going to right, and now it is not sticking out so much as it was before. Right, obviously I would do that a little slower, but you guys get the idea. Okay, so you want to try and get your at least one page inked. You should have one page penciled and one page inked. So next week we're going to work on getting that third page prepared. If you want to have your pages in the book, then you need to have 3 pages you have to have your whole story, right? So you need to figure out how to get that last page inked and then scanned and then put back underneath of your lettering and put all that together. For the next couple weeks, we're going to be kind of cleaning it up, and also I'm going to be teaching you more and more Photoshop techniques and coloring techniques and stuff like that, okay? But keep in mind, you cannot submit a colored page to the final folder. We do coloring separately. Okay, you can color your pages, but you can't color them for the final folder.
I'm sorry, okay? Jeez, I'm not perfect. Like, I know everything. Like,
I'm trying to figure out who that is.
guess what?
Okay, so any other questions before we go?
What's the prompt?
That's a good question.